My name is Harper Lane, and if someone had told me 10 years ago that I'd be sitting here, in the corner office of a Manhattan skyscraper, I would have laughed through tears of disbelief. This morning, the city looks almost unreal from up here. Yellow cabs crawl below like ants, and the Hudson shimmers under the late sun. The faint fragrance of lilies rests on the air. I always keep fresh ones on my desk. They remind me of resilience. My silk blouse clings lightly to my skin as I lean back in the leather chair, tracing the smooth edge of the glass desk with my fingertips. Then my phone buzzes. A name flashes on the screen, a name that still stirs something sharp inside me. Daniel Cross. My old boss. The man who once smirked across a conference table, told me I was a pretty face who should stick to taking notes, and laughed when I dared to pitch an idea. The man who mocked my skills in front of an entire team. Now he's asking for a meeting. In my office. At my firm. I stare at the phone, the faint aroma of coffee drifting from the cup beside me. For a moment, I let myself feel it all. The sting of old humiliation, the pride of what I've built, and the irony of how tables turn. Send him in. I tell my assistant, my voice calm, steady, laced with a quiet fire. Because today, Daniel Cross is about to discover exactly who owns the ground he's standing on. I wasn't always the woman people see today. Before the tailored suits, the corner office, and the skyline views, there was a younger version of me, eager, unpolished, and desperate to prove I belonged. Back then, I was 23. Fresh out of business school, clutching my degree like it was some kind of shield, I walked into Cross and Associates with stars in my eyes. I believed hard work would speak for itself. I believed people would respect me if I showed them my dedication. But I was wrong. The first time I dared to pitch an idea in a Monday meeting, Daniel Cross didn't even look at me. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, and let out a dry chuckle. "Cute," he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Harper, you're good with spreadsheets.
Stick to that.
Leave strategy to the big leagues." The room filled with laughter. My cheeks burned hot, my throat tightened, and I clenched the pen in my hand so hard it left a mark in my palm. But what stung most wasn't his words. It was the way everyone else looked at me. Like I was foolish for even trying. That night, I went home and cried into my pillow until my eyes were raw. I almost believed him. Almost. The next morning, when I slipped on my blazer, I noticed the bracelet on my wrist, a delicate silver piece my grandmother had given me the day I graduated. She had clasped it onto my wrist herself and whispered, "When they tell you can't, that's when you must." I stared at that bracelet for a long time, and then I made a decision. If Daniel Cross thought I was only good for spreadsheets, then fine. I'd let him laugh. I'd let him underestimate me. But I would build something bigger, stronger, and undeniable. Something he couldn't ignore. A week later, I walked into his office, handed him my resignation, and left with nothing but a box of my belongings, that bracelet on my wrist, and a fire in my chest that no amount of mockery could put out. That was the day Harper Lane stopped waiting for permission and started writing her own story. Walking out of Cross and Associates felt like stepping off a cliff. I didn't have a backup plan, just a savings account barely big enough to cover a few months of rent in my tiny Brooklyn apartment, and the stubborn belief that I was meant for more. The first few weeks were brutal. I worked from my kitchen table, laptop balanced on a stack of old textbooks, papers scattered everywhere, and the constant hum of the fridge reminding me how small my world had suddenly become. I pitched myself to anyone who would listen, small businesses, startups, local shops. Most said no. Some didn't even bother to reply. But one did. Her name was Cynthia Morales, a seasoned entrepreneur who ran a boutique marketing firm. She met me at a coffee shop after I sent her a desperate but passionate email outlining my ideas. I'll never forget how she studied me over her cappuccino, eyes sharp but kind. "You've got fire," she said, tapping a manicured finger on my resume. "That's rare. I'll give you a shot. Don't waste it." That was all I needed. Under Cynthia's mentorship, I worked like a woman possessed. Long nights blurred into mornings. I taught myself new software, devoured books on strategy, and rewrote failed proposals until they finally landed. I lived on takeout noodles and too much black coffee, my chipped nail polish a constant reminder that there wasn't time for luxuries. Slowly, the tide began to turn. My first big client, a small tech startup, took a chance on me, and when my strategies doubled their revenue within 6 months, word spread. One client turned into 3. 3 turned into 10. I rented a shoebox office above a laundromat with peeling paint and flickering lights, but it was mine. Still, I kept quiet. On social media, I posted vague updates, a photo of coffee with the caption "Late nights pay off," or a shot of a closed laptop with hustle mode. I didn't want Daniel Cross or anyone else to know what I was building. Not yet. Years passed, and the shoebox office grew into something more. I hired a small team, people who believed in me because I believed in them. We worked shoulder to shoulder, fueled by ambition and bad pizza, celebrating each win like it was the Super Bowl. The first time we crossed 7 figures in annual revenue, I sat alone in that office after everyone left, staring at the number on the screen. My hands trembled. I thought of the girl who once cried into her pillow, the girl mocked for daring to dream. And I realized I wasn't her anymore. I was Harper Lane, founder, strategist, fighter. And though the world hadn't seen it yet, I was becoming the woman who would one day own the very firm that once laughed me out of a meeting. The knock on my office door was sharp, almost impatient. My assistant peeked in first, then stepped aside as Daniel Cross walked in. He looked smaller somehow. Not in stature. He was still tall, still broad-shouldered, but his presence no longer filled the room the way it once had. His once expensive suit hung a little loose, the fabric tired at the seams. His salt and pepper hair was less distinguished now and more unkempt. His eyes darted across the room, cataloging every detail. The mahogany desk, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the abstract art lining the walls, the awards on the shelf, each one engraved with my company's name. His lips parted, but no words came out. "Mr. Cross," I said, my voice calm, almost pleasant. "Please have a seat." He lowered himself into the leather chair across from me, still staring like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Harper
Lane.
I have to admit, this is unexpected." I folded my hands on the desk. "Is it? I thought you'd keep track of your competitors." That word, competitors, made him flinch. His jaw tightened. "I knew you were doing something. But this..." He gestured vaguely to the office. "This is more than you imagined?" I offered, raising a brow. He didn't answer. Silence stretched between us, broken only by the faint hum of the city below. I let him squirm. It was a luxury I'd never been afforded in his boardroom, back when he'd cut me off, laughed me down, diminished me in front of others. Finally, he leaned forward, voice lower, more strained. "I didn't come here for small talk, Harper. I came because my firm is in trouble." There it was. Cross and Associates, the empire that once loomed over me like an unshakable mountain, was crumbling. And the man who mocked me now sat here, desperate. I tilted my head, letting the weight of irony settle in the air. "Interesting. Because, you see, Cross and Associates isn't really your firm anymore." His eyes snapped up to mine. Confusion flickered, then disbelief. "What are you talking about?" I smiled, slow and deliberate, and slid a folder across the desk. Inside were acquisition papers, signatures crisp and final. He opened it. Read. Froze. Then his head lifted, eyes wide, face pale. "No." "Yes," I said softly, savoring every syllable. "I own it. Every desk, every client, every last penny of Cross and Associates now belongs to Lane Strategies Incorporated. My company." The silence that followed was deafening. He stared at me like the ground beneath his feet had vanished. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. You bought me out?" "No," I corrected gently. "I bought the firm." You're optional." His chair creaked as he sat back hard, one hand dragging down his face. For the first time in my life, I saw Daniel Cross speechless. Vulnerable. Human. And I let him sit in it. Because this wasn't just a business deal. This was a reckoning. I leaned forward, my grandmother's silver bracelet catching the light. Years ago, you told me I wasn't cut out for strategy, that I should stick to spreadsheets. Do you remember? His eyes flickered, shame, recognition, regret. Well, I continued, voice steady, firm, unshakable. The woman you dismissed, mocked, and underestimated now signs your paychecks. The look on his face in that moment, a blend of disbelief and humiliation, was everything I had once dreamed of. But instead of gloating, I simply sat back, folded my hands, and said, "Welcome to your new reality, Mr. Cross." Daniel sat there, still reeling. His eyes flicked from the acquisition papers back to me, as though rereading them in his head might change the outcome. You can't just take everything," he muttered, voice cracking under the weight of defeat. "I didn't take anything, Daniel," I said evenly. "I earned it. Every late night, every rejection, every tear you laughed at, I turned into fuel. You mocked my skills. You told me I'd never belong. And now," I gestured around the office, "this is where that mockery brought us." He shifted uncomfortably, his bravado unraveling. For the first time, he wasn't the man at the head of the table barking orders. He was a man cornered. I let the silence linger before leaning forward. "Here's the thing. I don't intend to fire you outright. Not yet. But if you want to stay employed here, if you want a paycheck signed by me, then things will change. Radically." His brows knit together. "Changed how?" "First," I said, ticking the point off on my fingers, "you'll treat every employee with respect. No more condescension, no more public humiliation. The culture of this firm changes now, or you walk." His jaw clenched, but he stayed silent. "Second, you will support women in leadership. No more sidelining them. No more dismissing their ideas. If a junior associate has the courage to pitch something in a meeting, you will listen. You don't have to agree, but you will not mock." A muscle twitched in his cheek. "And third," I continued, my voice firm but not cruel, "you will own up to the mistakes you made. That includes me, Daniel. One day, not today, you will look me in the eye and acknowledge what you did. Because until you do, you'll never grow past it." His eyes flickered, anger, then something else. Shame, maybe. Vulnerability. "You're serious," he said at last. "As serious as the check I wrote to buy your legacy," I replied. "I didn't claw my way here to repeat your toxic patterns. If you want to remain part of this company, you will evolve. Otherwise," I gave a light shrug, "you're out. Simple as that." He slumped back in his chair, shoulders sagging. I could almost see the battle happening inside him, pride versus survival. Finally, his voice came quiet. "You're giving me conditions instead of cutting me loose." "Why?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "Because revenge is easy. Growth is harder. And maybe, just maybe, the man who once mocked me can still learn what real leadership looks like." For the first time, he didn't argue. He just nodded, faintly, like the weight of it all was finally sinking in. And in that moment, the power shifted entirely. The weeks that followed were strange, almost surreal. Watching Daniel Cross walk the same halls where he once ruled like a king, now quieter, more deliberate, was like witnessing a storm finally break into drizzle. At first, employees eyed him with suspicion. Whispers followed him into meeting rooms. But gradually he started changing. He listened more than he spoke. He asked questions instead of barking orders. He even, though awkwardly, thanked a young associate after she presented a solid pitch. It wasn't perfection. Old habits die hard. But it was something. And that something mattered. One evening, after most of the office had cleared out, I stood alone in my corner office, the city glittering beyond the glass. My gaze fell to the silver bracelet around my wrist, the one my grandmother gave me the day I graduated. Her words echoed in my mind. "When they tell you you can't, that's when you must." I ran my thumb along the delicate links, feeling the cool metal press against my skin. I thought of that 23-year-old girl who once cried herself to sleep after being mocked in a boardroom. How small she felt. How invisible. And I thought of the woman standing here now, the woman who built an empire from scratch, who turned pain into power, who owned not just a company, but her story. Daniel Cross had mocked my skills. He had tried to break me with laughter, with doubt, with arrogance. But in the end, he had given me the greatest gift of all, the fire to prove him wrong. I picked up my pen, signed off on a new expansion deal, and closed the folder with a soft snap. Because my life wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about growth, about leadership, about making space for others who were once told you can't. I straightened my blazer, looked out at the city, and let the truth settle deep in my chest. The man who once mocked my skills now worked under me, and I wore my victory with grace.